As an independent institute of higher education and a registered charity, the growth and success of Cambridge Muslim College rely on the generosity of our friends, patrons, and supporters from across the UK and beyond. Help Cambridge Muslim College train future generations of Muslim scholars, thinkers, and leaders, and continue delivering educational series like our Ramadan programming. You can help us continue our vital work through regular giving. Become a friend or patron of the college today through one-off donations, whatever the amount. You can also pay your zakat to the college, directly benefiting students in need. Visit cambridgemuslimcollege.ac.uk/donate and donate today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abdallah Rothman, and this is the third session of our program on faithful well-being as part of the Ramadan series from Cambridge Muslim College on this overarching theme of building taqwa. And so last session, we talked about awakening to presence as an important part of this idea of consciousness of Allah and the present state of awareness of Allah in our hearts and in our daily lives, and that being something that we have to cultivate in our sense of in our being that affects our well-being. And so today we want to continue this and talk about how this continued journey of aligning the self with this notion of being conscious of Allah and being conscious of Allah in the present moment, that when we look at afia, which is the Arabic term for what we would say well-being, but usually when we talk about well-being, because it's within this secular paradigm that doesn't include the eternal state of the soul and a hereafter, the akhirah, we're usually talking about physical well-being, our psychology, and to some degree, our sort of vague notion of our spiritual health. But when we look at afia, we're looking at the entire trajectory and picture of the human being that fundamentally includes the continuation beyond this life of the soul's eternal existence. And that longer term notion of the human trajectory impacts our state of well-being. And so it's interesting because we've been talking about being present in this life and being present in this moment as a way of being conscious of the reality of Allah. And so there is a aspect of this that has this seeming future orientation of thinking or being conscious of the akhirah, of something that is in the future, the afterlife. And that can feel like we're oriented to something distant and something out there and something in the future. And that could, from a cognitive standpoint, take us out of being present in the moment. But the notion of why akhirah and the acknowledgement and consciousness of akhirah is important in our taqwa, in our consciousness of Allah, and also in our state of our well-being, is that we need to consider in our well-being the state of our soul in its reality of being unveiled. Right? So we know that in this life, in the dunya, we are veiled to the reality of Allah, and we can remember and we can do things to lift that veil and to be aware and conscious of Allah. But it takes our will, it takes our intention, it takes orienting ourselves in this way. And so this idea that we think of the akhirah, and that should change our behaviors for what we're going to be held accountable to, can orient us to the future and again put us in this place of anxiety and constriction, of fear of what's going to happen in the future. And we know just from the study of psychology that when people are living in the past or the future, they tend to be either in the past and in regret, or focused on the future and in worry and anxiety. And that the way to really be in a place of contentment and well-being is to be in the present. And so this knowledge of the akhirah is not just about thinking about our success in the akhirah, of how we're going to be held accountable on that day. That makes us focus on our actions here. So we don't want to be oriented to it as this distant reality of some far off time and place where we will be either punished or rewarded, because that goes back into this notion of fear of Allah. But we should live our lives with this conscious awareness of the reality of akhirah in every moment. And we know that what that means is that the reality of akhirah is that the veil will be lifted. This is what that means, is that we have this eternal reality of our soul. And what akhirah means is that there will be a time when our notion of self, our notion of separateness and forgetfulness, the tendency of the nafs to be in ghafla, will be lifted. That veil will be lifted. And so what that means and what that orients us to is that we still have this part of our soul that is connected and that is conscious of Allah. And so bringing our alignment with ourself of that reality into this current state of the veil, living in the veil, is the work that we need to do to build taqwa and align us and build well-being. And so we know that indeed our actions in this life shape our station in the hereafter, yes. But our consciousness of the notion of akhirah should really affect our state of being. So when we realize and we're aware that our ruh is veiled only temporarily, and that veil will lift, it should awaken us to this notion that this dunya, the notion of ourselves, the struggles that we have in this life, is not real in this sense. What is more real is what is eternal. And that one way or the other, we will be fully aware of Allah. And that means that we get deluded by the facade of this life, thinking that it is more real. We can lose touch with true reality by trying to convince ourselves or being preoccupied with this current dimension of reality in this material realm, in this dunya, and in this sense of ourselves as separate with our own will. And so this can make us become misaligned with our true nature, and it can put us out of sorts. And we feel we feel it in our orientation to life when we're not aligned with that true reality of our nature of being in submission to Allah, in being reliant on Allah. We get more frustrated. We get more frustrated when things don't work out how we want. We get stressed and we worry about the future. And this is because we're forgetting that it's all in Allah's hands and that we're held by Allah. And so even when we focus on health as preservation of life, as if that is something that is in our control, rather than as a means of wholeness and alignment, so it's being oriented to the same things of managing our lives in the world and dealing with what we need to be dealing with for what we think is success, but redefining the success as including the akhirah. So success in terms of health is not longevity. It's not necessarily even having your body be in a better state or living longer or but it's really about being whole and in alignment with the reality that Allah is the sustainer. Allah gives us life. Allah gives us shifa. And that our true state of health is in our wholeness, in our awareness of our reliance on Allah. And that all the things that we define of success with our health, let's say, is all based on this physical, material part of our being that is temporary anyway. Right? And so we should be more concerned with the health and state of our inner reality of our being, the part of ourselves, our soul that is not temporary, that will not perish in this life, but continues on. And so this consciousness of the akhirah and this consciousness building this taqwa are going to align us with this sense of wholeness in the moment. And so we indeed need to be conscious of what we do and our actions and what we put forth. As Allah says in Surah Hashr, O you who believe, be conscious of Allah, ittaqwa Allah, and let every soul look to what it has put forth for tomorrow. But what is it that we should be focused on about what we put forth for tomorrow? Is Allah judging us only on our actions and deeds? No, He looks at our intentions as well. And more importantly than our success as being defined by our actions and our deeds, it's our state of being in submission to Him. Because if we only focus on actions and deeds for success, it's easy to be doing these things externally, mimicking them. But we want those good actions and good character to be coming from a place that is generated from being in a good state, inwardly. And so the outward should really be a product of the inward. And therefore, we have to recalibrate our notion of success in this life. It's not just the look of somebody who is doing the right thing and is pious and is going to be rewarded in this future reality, but actually focusing on the true success being the state of our soul in its submission to Allah and the heart, the state of the heart as it is purified. And that Allah tells us numerous times in the Quran, قَدْ أَفْلَهَ مَنْ تَزَكَى. Indeed, those who purify themselves are successful. And so, if we measure success based on having something for that day in the future, for that day of judgment in the future, what it does is it puts us out of the orientation to the consciousness of the akhirah, the reality of the veil being lifted, that should really put our focus on the current work that we need to do internally within ourselves now, not tomorrow, but the consciousness of tomorrow shouldn't put us in this sphere of let me accumulate things for over there, but it should put us in a state of what do I need to focus on that is within my domain of control, which is only inside of our internal being, right? Our feelings, our thoughts, our intentions, and our state. And so this idea of tomorrow, of being conscious of Allah for that day tomorrow, it's not about this distant, it's about orienting ourselves to the consciousness of the akhirah. And that should then orient ourselves to the present. Like we discussed in the last session, presence is where we can be in full submission. And being in a state of presence of Allah's love and mercy allows us to be giving over ourself, giving over our heart, and impacting our state of rida, contentment. And that all, when we focus on this external accumulation of deeds for a future state of being judged, we tend to be focused on our external locus of control, right? What am I going to be held accountable? What am I going to be judged on what I do? So we're focused on doing, and we're focused on being this future anxiety of what's going to happen. And that makes us feel out of control. When we focus on things that are out of control, the outcome and the future, this makes us feel out of control. And so when we focus on what is ours to control within our internal locus of control, we can find a place of coming into feeling control, because we're focused on the only thing that Allah gives us control over in His whole domain, and that is what is within ourselves. And so this idea of understanding afiyah as including akhirah in our well-being and our process of coming into building taqwa, this should really put us into a focus on the state of our heart, doing the work that we need to do to purify in our being. And so when we look at the prophetic example, the Prophet ﷺ was this beautiful character. We want to mimic his actions, his character, and oftentimes we focus on the sunnah of what he did, and focusing on these, how do we act as somebody with good character? How do we mimic the Prophet ﷺ? But that is important for us to mimic his actions, but really the point is to embody this prophetic character. And the only way to have this prophetic character that then leads to the external markers of good character is this internal dimension, which comes from purification of the heart, tazkiyah. So this قَدْ أَفْلَهَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى, same is purification, zakaha. So tazkiyah is this internal looking and taking account of ourselves to, yes, people think of it as removing spiritual diseases like envy, arrogance, heedlessness. But this is not just, again, about I'm bad and I need to rid these things. It's just the human nature is when we become in ghafla, when we become forgetful, there's things that accumulate on our heart, and we have to do this work of polishing. The polishing is really just in the moment, coming back into remembrance of Allah. And so this brings into this work of increasing our well-being, doing the work of self-accountability, self-development, self-purification, is hand in hand with purifying to remove the veils that delude us from being conscious of Allah. And so that's where this idea of doing this work of well-being, of taking care of our personal development in the state of our heart, is so that we can clean our heart, get rid of the veils while we're here in this life, and not waiting until the next life when the veil is lifted. And so we should take ourselves into account before we're taken into account. And that means that we need to be conscious and cautious about not getting caught up in the external. Only worrying about what we do and being judged for the future, but really allowing that consciousness of the full picture of our reality and what's really real in what will be lifted on that day in the akhirah. And that should really make us orient ourselves to caring for our state of being. And taking concern with the present rather than focused on the future. And that really requires that we remain in a state of self-awareness and self-reflection. And so this consciousness of Allah, or awareness of Allah, really goes hand in hand with self-awareness. He who knows his Lord knows himself. He who knows himself knows his Lord. Right? So because the pathway to being able to fully be conscious with Allah is to remove these veils on our heart. And so when we dig into knowing ourself, what we're knowing is the parts of ourself that are getting in the way. Our self gets in the way of the true self, the ruh, which is just in reliance and in submission to Allah. It's our nafs, our sense of ourselves as separate with this individual will and self-direction that deludes us and takes us away. And so we need to constantly be removing these veils, polishing the heart, and doing this work of tazkiyah to both purify from a state of well-being and unveil to build our consciousness. So consciousness of ourself, or self-awareness, will lead to more awareness of Allah in our life and being able to be in a state of submission. And so we need to focus our work not only on these acts of piety, but really of the state of our heart that leads to naturally doing these acts of worship and acts of piety and good character that come from being in alignment. When our soul is in alignment with the reality, right, doing the work of unveiling through the polishing of our heart in this life, in this moment, then we can be face to face with this reality and being able to live in the here and now with this awareness and an awakenedness to the reality of Allah, rather than this future distant time. And so taqwa is an ongoing journey. To build taqwa, it's synonymous with refining the heart, aligning ourself, our nafs with our ruh, doing this work of polishing the heart to increase our nearness to Allah. And this is always going to be impacted and directly connected to our state of well-being. Our ability to sort of deal with the ups and downs in life, which are inevitable, come from our relative stability with recognizing who's in control. Also, it's not about getting control. It's about dealing with what you have control over and letting go of everything else. Leaving this to Allah. This is how we come into a state of wholeness and health and well-being, is knowing what's ours and knowing what's not ours, and not getting involved, letting everything go other than what is within our responsibility, which is the work of our polishing our heart. So I will encourage us, especially in this month of Ramadan, as we are into the month now and benefiting from the work that we have been doing to increase our consciousness of Allah, is that we should not forget to, when we do the acts of worship, not forget to also consult our heart. Astafti kalbak, like the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam. And what did the Prophet do when he said Astafti kalbak? He touched his chest. So this is pointing to this inward place within ourself that we must consult, we must take account. And this is where we will be able to, inshallah, increase both our well-being and our increased state of taqwa. And so this is a lifelong journey of self-growth towards true afiyah. When we work on our psychological, spiritual, physical health with the akhirah in mind, with the ultimate state of our soul, this is how we can really understand that this process of building taqwa and having more consciousness of Allah and being in a deeper state of Islam is intimately connected to and our work on ourselves and our state of being. And so we have to take this on as a project of self-development. And this is something that we need guidance for and we need to continue work on. So this is the work that I am dedicated to in this field of Islamic psychology, is the integration of our understanding of Islam and self-development. And we have lots of courses that go into the depths to be guided on this journey of understanding Islam and our path of self-development hand in hand. And so you can find out more about this and the courses and resources that we have available at daralshifa.com. Next session will be our last session for this Ramadan series, and we'll be focusing on embodying faith and the practical steps to living with taqwa in every moment, especially as we move out of this blessed month and we're looking to carry the light forward into the year that follows, inshallah. I look forward to being with you again in the next session. Barakallah feek. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Ramadan provides us with an invaluable opportunity to increase our piety, our God consciousness. It is also an opportune time to give generously in charity. As an independent institution of higher education and a registered charity, our work relies on the generosity of individuals like you. During this blessed month, we ask you to support Cambridge Muslim College. You can do so through regular giving, by becoming a friend or patron, or one-off donations, whatever the amount. This Ramadan, our goal is to make 10,000 new friends. Head to the donate page on our website, become a friend for as little as £5 a month, and help us continue delivering educational programs like this for the wider community, training the next generation of Muslim scholars, thinkers, and leaders.